In 1733, a philanthropist from England by the name of James Oglethorpe would establish a colony in what is now modern-day Georgia. 3 years later, he would establish an outpost on St. Simon's Island called Fort Frederica. And today we're going to explore the grounds of Fort Frederica and see what we can learn. Now, Fort Frederica was established as part of a series of outposts to help defend the British colonies from the threats from Native Americans, Spain, and even France. Obviously, we know that Spain had a foothold in Florida at the time, and this place acted as a buffer to protect Savannah and the rest of these southern British colonies. Now, Fort Frederica would have been the center of a conflict between the British and Spanish in 1742. And that conflict that I'm referring to is the War of Jenkins Ear. Again, it started, I believe, in 1739. And it started with the British attacking St. Augustine, laying siege. That siege would fail, and 2 years later in 1742, the Spanish would invade St. Simon's Island, and 2 key battles would be fought here that would help end the War of Jenkins Ear. And I got some pretty cool artifacts from that time, just showing examples of what some of the uniforms would look like. This is a 18th century grenadier cap. Now, grenadiers would wear these caps because it would make them physically imposing. They were already supposed to be tall soldiers, but wearing this cap would make them appear even taller, which I guess at that time would be pretty intimidating. And some Scottish Highlanders would also fight here. And here's a few other variations of the British uniforms. Interesting. And yet another example of what a grenadier would have looked like. And, well, of course, you weren't a grenadier without grenades. What a great visual that is. So I'm assuming once you light that fuse there, it would obviously burn into that wood core, and then once that wood core burns, it would set off the black powder inside, and then your grenade would explode. Probably not very reliable, but interesting nonetheless. Now, at the height of Fort Frederica, over 600 British regulars would be stationed here, along with militia, and over 500 settlers, which would actually settle inside the fort, which I didn't know. I was under the impression that this was just a military outpost, but apparently this was a thriving settlement here on St. Simon's Island. Now, this is an example of what the town wall would have looked like. So these trees in front of us would have been the start of the mile-long wall that once enclosed the town. And construction of the wall began in 1739 and continued for several years. The earthworks consisted of a sodded rampart 6 feet high with a firing step on the inside and a moat on the outside. So again, you can kind of see the moat here, and then what's left of the earthworks. So, although we can't really see anything, it kind of just looks like an open field, but this road right here down the middle, that was Broad Street. And this is a depiction of what it may have looked like. Imagine a typical day here on Broad Street in the early 1740s. So this was the main avenue within the fort. So now we're making our way down what was once Broad Street, and along this street they have interpretive signage along with the former foundations of some of the residents that used to reside here. And this place is a pleasant surprise. Coming here, I just thought it was an old British fort used in the 1740s, but it turns out within that fort was an entire settlement. So it's super neat. I'm learning as we're going right now because I didn't know any of this even existed. So this is pretty cool. Here's one of the former foundations of a residence. And let's see. In 1743, Mary Musgrove Matthews, General Oglethorpe's Indian interpreter, lived on this plot. That's really cool. Here's another foundation. And again, they do a really good job of describing what the house may have looked like. And this one's actually going into what they made the concrete walls out of. It's called tabby, which is concrete made of sand, lime, and oyster shells. And then they would pour it in these boxes or forms, and it would harden, and you'd have your outer walls. Now this house is significant because the foundation discovered here probably belonged to a house built by Primrose Maxwell, a lieutenant in Oglethorpe's regiment who actually took part in one of these sieges of St. Augustine, which is about 2 hours south of here in Florida. Just wanted to give you a closer look at one of these outer walls here, but you can see that these oyster shells, and they're in there pretty good. This is a solid foundation. And think about many of these houses were built in the 1730s and 1740s, and the foundations are still here, even after over 200 years of Mother Nature pounding this area. So this foundation is pretty interesting. There's something, this structure here is, I haven't seen that on other foundations. And this is the home of a candle maker, and that's what his house would have looked like. This is what it is today, but apparently this brick structure right here, I originally thought it was maybe steps to the ground level floor, but apparently these are fireplaces, and in the middle, like on top, is an oven. That is really cool. I can't get over how well these are preserved. And then just one more look at how it is now and what his house would have looked like at the height of this settlement. And before I forget, I keep forgetting to show you guys this, but here's a few of the artifacts that were found at this site. I have a piece of a pot, a candle maker's tool. Awesome. So something that my amazing fiance just discovered, she's far more observant than me. These giant oak trees here, they all have tags on them. Now, I don't know if you can see that, but that's the website. And that's the tag number 176. You can go to that website and type in the tag, and it'll tell you everything about the tree, its age. This tree here is 150 years old, approximately. So we're nearing the end at what was once Broad Street. We started way down there, and man, oh man, we found this. Now, as a military history junkie, I am pretty excited right now. But this is what is left of the fort here. And as you can see, this structure here is the King's Magazine. And that is what's left. Man, this is awesome. So, and also, I don't know if you can see the terrain here. This is what's left of the earthworks as well of this fort. And just to give you an aerial view of it again, you have your palisade walls, and then your rampart, which is your earthworks. That's what we're seeing here. And I don't know if you can see the foundations, but that's the storehouses. How cool is this? All right, let's go have a closer look. So now we're in the center of the fort, which is commonly either the parade ground or just called the parade. And this is the foundation of the North Storehouse. Now, as the name implies, they would store their food here, ammunition, powder, to help keep it out of the elements. And I'm not really sure, there's no signage here, but I believe this is what's left of one of the bastions. I believe this is one of the North Bastion here, which is a defensive structure, usually armed with artillery, but then you can also see the remnants of the earthworks. And just to help explain what we're seeing here, they believe that the portion of the King's Magazine that we're seeing is this portion, which would hold the powder magazines. This is where they would keep their powder, again, out of the elements. And you would also want to protect it. You don't want a cannonball from a ship hitting that powder, because then you're going to lose this whole area. But archaeologists believe the King's Magazine had three principal parts. On the left is what we're seeing, partially intact. 2 vaults for protecting the gunpowder. At the center was the main entrance, or sally port. And let's have a closer look here. Now, I don't see a sign saying that we aren't allowed in there. So, let's have a peek. And here's one of the powder magazines. And here's one of the walls of the King's magazine. You can see it's still that tabby substance. You can kind of see the oyster shells in there. And here's the outer wall here. And here's the Frederica River, I believe. So you can kind of see the position that this fort commanded. Right on the river to protect against naval attack. And also you got these marshes here on each side that would inhibit an infantry attack. So this place was set up to the point where they would have to attack from this direction, this way, which is east. That is south and west, obviously. And here's north. And again, you can see what's left of some of the earthworks here. I have never seen earthworks in person, at least not original earthworks, but these are pretty well preserved. So we're on the south side of the fort, and this position would have looked pretty close to this. You have your artillery positions in conjunction with your palisade walls and your ramparts. And this area would guard the southern approach. And a few of the pieces of artillery. I believe these are 18 pounders. I could be wrong. I'm not an artillery expert, but just judging by the size. And some background. It had 4 bastions, a ditch palisaded, and a covered way, which is an outer moat, defended by 15 pieces of cannon. And this was, I'm not even going to try and pronounce that last name, but this was the Frederica engineer in 1739. And right on cue, these are 32-pound cannons, not 18. So, again, me showing my expertise, or lack thereof. Man, this is a commanding position here. And a beautiful area. And this is where the North Bastion would have been. And again, I'm just a sucker for earthworks. I don't know what it is, but I just love them. It really helps paint the picture of where the fort once was. And before we head over to that structure there, I'm going to check out this one. Again, this is pretty unique. We haven't seen these in some of them, but right there is a fireplace. And that circular structure behind there, originally I thought it was maybe a well, but per the layout here, they believe it was an oven. And this was the foundation to the Morehouse. And by Moore, his first name was Francis. He served as General Oglethorpe's secretary, town recorder, and keeper of the supplies in the king's storehouses. And I just think it's really neat that you can see the depiction of what the house would have looked like. And something that also is a nice touch, obviously you can see the street signs, but they also have the streets marked. Just something as simple as this really helps paint the picture to what you're seeing. At least for me, anyway. Man, such a cool area. Now we're gonna head over to what I believe is the barracks. Now this is awesome. Now, it's hard to tell, but this is the barracks for some of the enlisted soldiers. And this is a depiction of what the barracks would have looked like. So, this structure here is right there. And in the center, again, is your parade, where they would form up in the mornings. And then you have your barracks around the parade. As you can see, the foundations. I just can't get over how creative they were back then. I mean, we're essentially looking at predominantly oyster shells. And here we are, 200, 250 years later, and the foundations are still here. And in this case, the main structure of this barracks is still here. It's just incredible. And this barracks, about 200 British troops were stationed at Frederica at the time of the Spanish attack in 1742, which we'll cover here in a second. But this structure took form of a square with rooms surrounding an open parade. Walls are made of that tabby substance, about a foot thick. And then soldiers entered through the barracks to the existing gateway tower. And during the 1742 military campaign, the barracks served as a hospital and as a quarters for Spanish prisoners of war. Huh, I didn't know that. And a few of the pieces that were found here. Again, it may be hard to see, there's some condensation on here, but a key found along the east wall. Apparently these are nippers and an iron pothook. And just to give you an example of the layout, captains and your lieutenants in the corners, and your hospital was directly in front of us right here. And that brick circle there, that is your well. And on the sides would be your privates, sergeants, corporals, drummers. And I just wanted to give you guys a different angle. Here's the view from the other side of the gatehouse. And just to give you some perspective of how tall this thing truly is, that's the gatehouse behind me. And I am in the parade, or the parade field, in the middle of the barracks. As you can see the foundation behind me. This is awesome. Now, in 1742, Fort Frederica did see some action. We're here just outside of Fort Frederica, and this is the site of the Battle of Gully Hole Creek. And late in the morning, on July 7th, 1742, Georgia Rangers, guarding the military road approach to the town of Frederica, sighted a force of over 100 Spanish soldiers and their Indian allies. James Edward Oglethorpe, founder of Georgia, quickly organized a force composed of the Highland Independent Company. Now, I believe this was the 42nd Foot, who were stationed at Fort St. George, which is about 30 minutes from here. Now, along with the Independent Highland Company, the Rangers and Native American forces would courageously lead an assault against the Spanish in this general area. And you can see by the terrain, it is not conducive to European warfare like they were used to. This is a prime location for guerrilla warfare. You can't really have formations, and it would be really hard to give commands to fire in unison or volley fire. But as you can see, here's the road there. And Fort Frederica is about maybe a half mile that way. But this is the site of the Battle of Gully Hole Creek. Now, as you saw the terrain, the fighting was extremely fierce, and I'm sure it was pretty close quarters. After an hour, British forces routed the Spanish invaders, and the Spanish losses numbered more than 1/3 of their force. So about 33 to 35 casualties here in this hour-long engagement. One Spanish captain was killed, and another was captured in the intense fighting. Oglethorpe's losses were light. I believe he lost one soldier, and it was for heat exhaustion. But after this battle, Oglethorpe would organize another defense at the Battle of Bloody Marsh Creek, I believe, and that's about another 15-minute drive that way. And Oglethorpe's forces would rout the Spanish again at that site, and casualty estimates for the Spanish number anywhere between 100 and 150. Now, I'm not sure how accurate those are, but that's what the British documents entailed. Now, the victory here would ensure Britain's foothold in the colonies, especially the southern colonies of Georgia and South Carolina, and Spain wouldn't attempt to push back the British ever again after this. Now, you're probably wondering why the Spanish would just randomly attack the British colony of Fort Frederica. Well, 2 years earlier, in 1742, James Oglethorpe and the British Army would invade Florida and lay siege to St. Augustine for, I believe, almost 42 days. Now, in an early episode, we covered Fort Mose and the events there, but the Spanish would defeat Oglethorpe's forces at the Battle of Bloody Mose, and they would retreat back to Georgia, and in retaliation, 2 years later, the Spanish would attempt to drive the British out of Georgia, and it would fail.